Welcome to the second game, and this is my favorite game, Gukesh.
Mhm.
Is it one of your favorite as well?
I really like this game, but I can't say this is like my favorite because most of the ideas I already knew it. I also had to do a lot of work on the board, but like most of the ideas, it was not in my preparation, but I kind of knew the concepts and also it's not. I'm not very proud of the game, but it was a very, very good game for sure.
Okay, so let's go through this game. It is against Andreas Heimann at the Menorca Open 2022. Very strong tournament.
Yeah, it was a lot of Indians also played it. Arjun, Nihal, a lot of very strong players.
Did you win it?
Yes, I won it.
You won the event. Wow.
Yeah, so it was a 7-round event, and this was the 4th round. I was on 3x3, and this was a double round day. So I couldn't prepare much, and but I was happy to play a very good game. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, let's go.
I don't think it was a double round game, but it was a late evening game. So not sure actually.
So Heimann is a strong German GM. He's close to 2600 elo, and he opens the game with d4. And you went your classical system with e6 and d5. You know, whenever someone plays d4 with you, I have always seen you take this kind of a setup.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of a thing for you, like I must play the most solid openings, or what is it?
No, I think there's just sound opening, the most common one. Of course, there's QGA and QGA where you take the C pawn early. So there is that, but
Or you can play Queen's Indian, or you can play Benoni, but all this doesn't attract you.
I've never really tried those. I mean, not inferior openings, but let's say it's considered a bit not very sound. Never really tried it, but of course I've played King's Indian a lot. Kind of given up on King's Indian, but I have experimented with some others, but mostly I like to play sound openings.
Okay, so he went g3, playing the Catalan. You gave a check.
Yeah.
Bishop d2, and now I think this is one of your favorite moves in this position, which is to play a5. Can you explain like why a5? Because there's also another idea, which is to just drop the bishop back, like provoking here so that the knight doesn't get this square and so on.
Yeah. A5, it's a very interesting line. I was kind of attracted to it at this point. I was playing it quite regularly, this one. It's because it's quite dynamic. As you'd say, like black is trying to get c5 quite early. So with, let's say in bishop e7 line, for example, instead of a5, if you go bishop e7, bishop g2, castle. Here, if you take dc4, I think you'll lose the pawn with queen a4. So with a5, I force him to defend the pawn. I mean, you can also castle in the a5 line. So let's say bishop g2 castle.
Yeah, this happened.
So if castle, I take the pawn. I mean, it's still possible. It's theory.
This is theory.
Yeah, but it's kind of sharp. And I force him to defend the pawn, queen c2.
You mean here?
Yeah, here, and I immediately go for concrete stuff with c5.
So you like this concrete solution where you are active?
Yeah, so also the resulting position is quite dynamic. So.
Okay, so c5 was, this happened in the game. He castled and you played c5 and he took on d5. And I think here, because your c5 pawn is hanging now, you took back on d4.
Yes.
And essentially what you're saying is that if you take here,
I get a free tempo with the bishop.
I'll take here, I'll get my knight out, and black has no problems. So he took with the knight. And now my thinking would be that you would take back with the pawn or the knight, but there is still, you still keep putting pressure.
Yeah. So the knight on d4 is currently not very good. So I force him to defend the knight with queen b6, and d3 is also kind of weakening some squares around this king and
some light squares. You know, like I was taught that if you play g3, try to keep your pawn back on e2 like this way, and if you play e3, then maybe don't play g3 because then the light squares get a bit weak.
Yeah, but now there's no good place for this knight. For example, if knight f3, I get a lot of activity with ed5 and knight c6. And I guess there are also other possibilities, but yeah, this is just not very challenging. So it's kind of a trade-off. I mean, you weaken your structure with e3, g3, I get ice-learning. So it's kind of a trade-off.
And you have to now take with the pawn. Is it possible to take with the knight here?
I guess it is possible, but let's say after castle.
Yeah.
I kind of he'll go knight c3 next, or maybe a3 first and then knight c3. And then kind of have problems. Usually in Catalan, we have problems developing the bishop, and it still remains.
So in return for the isolated pawn, you're saying my bishop is now active.
Yeah, my bishop is active. My development is much easier.
Okay. He castles. Very logical. You say I develop my knight.
Yeah.
He takes your knight. You're of course going to take with the pawn. I mean, taking with the queen doesn't make sense, right? I mean, why would you do that?
Yeah. So you still remain with the Isolani and maybe some knight c3 and a3. With bc6, okay, I mean, it's still hanging pawns, but you have more dynamic possibilities, and also I don't think it's as bad as Isolani.
Yes. So now your pawns are joined, but remember that this is a backward pawn.
Yeah.
And generally, the square in front of the backward pawn is weak. So c5 is a weakness. Yeah. So strategically, black is facing some dangers.
Yeah. So it's as I said, it's a trade-off. I've given up some strategic. I've given some strategic weaknesses, and I have some. I have dynamic possibilities.
I don't see it yet, but we will see it soon. That's what this is about, to learn how to attack from positions which are, not in some of the books you're given positions where the attack is very natural to see. But here we learn how from the scratch an attack is built. So Heimann said, well, I'm going knight c3. I'm putting my knight here. I'm going to attack your queen. I'm looking at the c5 square. Yeah. And I think this is the first moment where our viewers have to pause the video, think, what is it that Gukesh did here? It's a very interesting move. Black to move. Think. Okay, Gukesh, you have to explain it to us. What is your thought process like? And I think this was still your preparation.
Yes.
So you knew it.
I actually still I had a game in this same position, maybe a couple of months before this event. So basically, strategically for right now I'm worse because of the backward pawn and the weak c5 square.
Right.
So if I play some logical move, like let's say bishop d7, he goes knight a4, and then he gets good control of the c5 square, and I just can't afford to play slowly with some strategic weaknesses.
One move can just ruin your position, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. So strategically inferior position, it's important to create your play. So
one natural move that comes to my mind which looks active is bishop a6. Does it make sense?
It's possible. It's a developing move, but it's also controlling a lot of empty squares. So like bishop a6, let's say rook fc1 or rook fd1 and rook ac1.
Right.
And then it's not exactly clear what the bishop is doing there. And next white will get knight a4, knight c5. So, yeah, it's I don't think it's such a bad move, but yeah, I think what I did is better.
Okay, and the move that Gukesh played here is
h5.
h5.
Yeah. So basically, the point is with e3 has weakened a lot of light squares,
Right.
and some I think f3 square in particular is very important.
Let me make it a red square to know that that's a weakness. Yeah.
So I'm just looking for an attack with h4 and yeah, h4.
Maybe even push the pawn all the way. One question I have is, if he plays h4 and stops your idea, what have you gained?
With h4, white has seriously weakened the g4 square. So right now, let's say it's not so clear at the very moment, but it will be very important in the long run. Let's say I play bishop g4, for example.
Right.
I get rook c8, rook d8, and
you take control of this square also.
Yeah, he can't put his rook on d1, and in general, weakening the g4 square, it's not very nice for.
And if he has to play f3, that would be ugly.
Yeah,
it weakens e3, bishop is closed. So right. So h5, h4 is in your favor if it happens. So Heimann said, I don't care. You play h5, you want to do your stuff. Knight a4, logical.
I go queen d8.
You go back.
Because he can't take the pawn because I have bishop d7.
This is hanging, and by the way, if he takes here, and then takes the pawn attacking the rook, as you rightly pointed out, the knight is hanging.
Yeah, also queen c6 because bishop d2 a8 is hanging.
Oh, directly, right.
Yeah, so
right.
I have to go bishop d7.
Directly.
Yeah, and now the queen is overloaded with after queen c2, bishop a4.
Generally, when Gukesh says a move, he thinks about it very carefully and says it. So not easy to refute it. Like you said, queen c6. I was like, oh, bd2 is hanging, but no, not really. A8 was hanging there. Yeah. Cool. So b3 was played by him, and he's now threatening to take on b4 and take on c6.
Yeah.
Because then his knight is defended with the b3 pawn. Okay.
But yeah, as I said, you can't play slow moves. I continued with my attack, h4.
h4, let's go. h4, and your opponent took. And here I think he could take on c6.
Yeah, I mean, queen c6 is a bailout option. It will most probably end in a lot of exchanges and most likely draw. Because
you can take back and you can win this pawn.
Yeah, let's say bishop d7.
Yeah.
Queen c5, h3, bishop f3. Like take, rook a4, bishop d1, queen a5. It's basically just
it would land into equality and maybe a quick draw. Yeah. But your opponent was ambitious. He
decided to fight on,
which is interesting. Which is why this game is part of this Fritz trainer. Rook f d1 was played, and I think Gukesh, it's a good moment for people to just take not a long time for this move, but just a few seconds to think what is the first move that comes to your mind as black, and you're going to learn a very important concept here. Black to play. What do you do here? I think, Gukesh, you make a move which is one of your favorite moves, yes?
Most probably. So, yeah, I go h3.
h3, and somehow this move is very important because you have tension here, which is in your favor. You can decide when to take. He can never take it. It spoils his structure. Yet you release the tension and put your pawn on h3.
Yeah, so the main advantage of the pawn on h3, especially when white has a pawn on e3 and g3, is that the f3 square is of very critical. And with the pawn on h3, I make it even more. I make the g2 bishop and the f3 square very important. And let's say if I exchange the g2 bishop, it will be really dangerous for white because once I get any piece to f3,
let's say the queen or
Yeah.
knight or something.
Knight or queen to f3, it's basically over. So yeah, with also there are also a lot of back rank issues with the pawn on h3, and he can never really solve that issue. So it's nothing concrete, but in general there are a lot of things that white needs to take care of after I go h3. So
Also in endgame, sometimes the h2 pawn is very weak.
yeah, that can be.
And this pawn is just 2 squares away from queening.
Yeah, but I must say that in endgames though, h3 pawn can be a weakness.
True.
So, but white has to get to the endgame first.
The endgame is still far off.
Yeah.
And Heimann played bishop f3. And now this is your moment to think. And we are going to come back with the answer in the next video. What did Gukesh play here? Gukesh, are you out of your prep now?
Yeah, I think after b3 already I was out of it.
So you are already out on move number 15 here.
Yeah.
We are now on move 18. Try to think what did Gukesh do here, and see you in the next video.